Without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Toomey.
Well, thank you. And I thank you, Sandy, for the invitation today. And I realize that there's a range of participants in this in this program. And really what I want to do is to sort of focus on how I got my very first NSF award. And so a lot of what I'm going to say is going to be very specific to those who are just starting their career. But it also is going to apply, there's some general things, some general takeaways that are also going to apply for those that are trying to get funded. And so I really want to talk about, and I know you've heard a lot of different speakers, and you probably have heard a lot of general information. What I wanted to give you was a very specific description of my journey. And my journey is unique. Everyone is going to have a unique journey, but I think that there are some lessons that I learned that I would like to impart. And you know what, a lot of it comes down to common sense, but sometimes it's really hard to remember common sense because we have a lot of constraints. We don't have all the time in the world. And so I just want to talk about some of the mistakes that I've made. And even though I've made some mistakes, I've made some mistakes multiple times. So that's why it's a journey. So I just kind of want to talk about my journey to the career award. And really the title is, it's not easy, but it's not impossible. And that's pretty much for any type of funding. So to give you just a little bit of background, I started at USF in January of 2005. And my background is in the area of polymers. So really, the only real opportunity that I had for funding right away was through the National Science Foundation. In fact, the National Science Foundation is one of the broadest places to get funding from. There's NIH as well, but if you're not in the NIH world, it's very difficult to get funding there, whereas NSF covers a broad range of stuff. And it's usually the go-to place to get funded throughout your entire career. Okay, so decisions. So one of the very first things that I did as soon as I arrived at USF is that I sort of came up with a list of different sort of organizations that I was going to try to get funding from. Some were from private organizations that would give money for first year faculty. So I applied for that. Through ACS, they have money for starting faculty. So I really tried to target all of those sort of organizations that basically give money to starting faculty. And I did that for a couple of reasons. One is because you're only competing against other beginning faculty, and it's also a great way to get money early on. So within the National Science Foundation, there are really two choices. One is an NSF 3-year unsolicited award. This is the most common of the funding mechanisms through NSF. And of course, the other one is going to be the 5-year career award. And the career is a little bit different than the unsolicited award. For the career award, you only have 3 attempts, and it's limited competition, right? You have to be within, I think, the first 5 or 6 years of starting your position, and you only compete against that particular peer group. An unsolicited award you can apply to, but you're also then competing against senior researchers as well. And so again, sort of the unsolicited here, this is the principal funding mechanism of National Science Foundation. It's open to all applicants. And so one of the first decisions I had to make was, am I going to submit for a career award or am I going to submit for an unsolicited award? And what you do, right? Some people don't think they're ready yet to apply for a career award. So they'll apply for an unsolicited award first. My advice, though, is to start submitting to your career award right away. The reason is that if you have a great idea, and if it gets funded for an unsolicited award, you can't use that idea for a career award. And there are certain advantages to having a career award over that of an unsolicited, and I'll get into some of those advantages. So one of the biggest things that I want to stress, though, is that when you're writing a career award is very similar to writing an unsolicited award. The emphasis is a little bit different. In the career award, you are being evaluated on an integration of research and education. But with the career award, you get 5 years of funding. The unsolicited award, you only get 3 years of funding. Also, with the 5-year career award, your competition are other early career faculty. So there are some advantages to starting off trying to write for a career award. But even though that, I just want to point out that the approach to writing the career is a little bit different than an unsolicited, I do want to emphasize that both types of proposals are evaluated on the same 2 criteria. And you've probably heard about this before through NSF, that the 2 things that are evaluated are intellectual merit, and the intellectual merit criterion encompasses the potential to advance knowledge. That is a very ambiguous statement, and it's hard to describe what that exactly means, and I'll get into that a little bit later in the talk. And then there's broader impacts, and the broader impacts criterion encompasses the potential to benefit society and contribute to the achievement of specific desired societal outcomes. And just like the intellectual merit, it's hard to completely understand what are broader impacts. And what I'll get to a little bit later is that intellectual merit and broader impacts become very clear in a panel discussion. And it's going to be, if you've never served on a panel, you need to serve on a panel. So the initial steps. After I got here, I sort of had a vague idea of what I wanted to do. I took some ideas from my postdoctoral experience. So in my postdoctoral experience, I started working with thin polymer films. And when I was as a graduate student, my research was in the absorption of polymers. And I kind of wanted to take the 2 and combine them somehow. So my first decision then was, do I do this through a 3-year unsolicited, or do I do this with a career proposal? And I decided to go with a career proposal because I figured that getting a career proposal was probably just as hard or just as easy as getting an unsolicited proposal, but I would rather have a career proposal. And again, you only have 3 shots at it, and you have 5 years or 6 years. Unsolicited proposals, you have your entire career. So I arrived in January of 2005. And what I did for the first 3 months is I sort of put together a skeleton draft of the proposal. And what the skeleton draft ultimately ended up doing, although I didn't know it at the time, is that it became the blueprint for my research activity. In the very first proposal that I had submitted, I had very little preliminary data. And the thing that I want to emphasize here is that preliminary data is not a necessary requirement to getting funded, but it can mitigate a common review statement. This can't be done. And that happens a lot. It's happened to me several times. I did not get my first career award funded, and one of the reviewers said that what I was proposing cannot be done. And it turns out it was my own fault because I didn't explain it well enough. But I could have gotten around that altogether if I just had the background data. So after I completed the skeleton draft, I identified, so I went through the NSF website, and I was able to identify 2 potential programs at NSF that I could submit to. And I contacted both program managers. And I was pretty excited at this point because I thought I'm going to talk to the program managers and they're going to give me all sorts of feedback. And so what I did is I had a little white paper, and I think I sent it to both of the program managers, and only one got back to me. So what I sort of found out is that contacting program managers, it's not always so easy. So you always want to start that in advance, and you do want to contact the program manager. And so the one that got back to me, this was in DMR polymers. I decided that after talking to him that my proposal might be a better fit in the other NSF area, the program manager who did not get back to me. So I think I tried to pursue, I had emailed him, he never emailed back. Then I think I called him a couple times, and then I finally got him on the phone. That took about a month, I think. So while I was talking or contacting the program managers, I had also asked from colleagues in the field that I knew that had gotten career proposals funded, and I asked them if I could see their proposals. And I think I got like 4 or 5 of them. And I sort of found one that I liked and used it as a blueprint for my proposal. This has to be a caveat here because I put blueprint in quotation marks. And one thing that I want to impress upon is that even though you have funded proposals, what works for somebody does not necessarily work for you. So you have to sometimes take these with a grain of salt, but it's still a handy thing to have. Well, I did finally get in touch with the second program manager. Took about a month. And after speaking with him, I thought his area would be a good fit. What became evidently clear, though, in that conversation is that I could probably submit to both of the programs that I had reached out to. But it was sort of clear, talking to the program managers, that I could not write a generic proposal and then decide where to submit. I was going to have to sort of pick a program and then write what the proposal was going to be on to fit either one of those programs. And even though I knew that, I decided not to follow that advice for whatever reason. And I was still a little confused. And so I reached out to a colleague and he told me that I really need to look at both programs and to see what has been funded in each. And he also told me to look at the success ratios or the success rates. And that latter statement, to look at the success rates, is something that's really important, especially if there's 2 programs that are a match. And if you want to get funded, you want to submit to the program that has the higher rate of success. And sometimes that information is a little difficult to come by, but you can kind of get an idea based on how many career awards each program awards. And you can find that on the NSF website. So I was unclear as to which, the upside of that, I was unclear on what I wanted to apply for. So despite that, I spent the next 2 weeks sort of polishing the proposal, and I identified who would write the support letters. And it was about a week before I had to submit this, where I decided to finally commit to DMR Polymers. And my whole reason for doing this is that on the website, DMR Polymers award 3 to 4 careers per year versus the other area, which is in CBET, which is only 2 to 3. So I made the decision to enhance my chances of getting funded, and I went with DMR Polymers. So the day of the deadline, I submitted the proposal. Actually, I started submitting the proposal earlier in the day, but there was a glitch with the conversion of my Word document to a PDF. And because of that, I almost did not submit that. And boy, was that a big learning lesson right there, because I should have converted this to a PDF to know if there was going to be any problems. And there was a problem with the figures. So I had to redo many of the figures to get them to convert correctly to PDF. That's much less of a problem today, but that's not something that you want to wait until the very last minute to do. So we submitted it, and I felt relieved. I was very happy with the proposal and was confident of success. Now, why was I confident of success? Well, it's because I had spent a lot of time writing this proposal, and I had a blueprint to follow. A couple days later, after I submitted the proposal, I got an email from the program manager, the program director, informing me that I needed to contact him. So I contacted him. And he told me that I did not follow directions with regards to 2 things. I did not follow directions with regards to the budget, and I did not follow the detailed instructions as to how support letters need to be written. The supporting letters had information that that sort of expanded upon the proposal itself, and you're not supposed to do that. So he made me remove all of those support letters because everything has to be contained in those 15 pages, and you cannot use support letters to add to those 15 pages in any way whatsoever. And the program manager reminded me that the budget for the career awards in his program was $480,000, and I budgeted $600,000. He informed me that the reviewers may make a decision based on that if they don't think the scope of work can be accomplished with $480,000. And so I remember I was a little surprised, and I was like, well, how was I supposed to know that the budget was $480,000? That was a lesson learned. If you looked at all the previous proposals that had been funded, they were all around the 460 to 480 range. And I should have asked the program manager that I'm going to submit 600,000, and I've noticed that everyone else is around 480. Is that okay to do? I did not do that. So lesson learned, follow directions. And if you're uncertain, ask the program manager. I did not do that. About 5 months later, despite being so optimistic about my proposal, I got the rejection. And this was the panel summary. So normally you have 3 to 4 individual reviews. And then there is a panel of maybe about 15, it depends, but like 12 to 15 people that will review your proposal as a panel. And this was my panel. I had put in all of this effort, and here is the panel summary. This is a well thought out and written proposal involving A, the synthesis of cross-linked copolymer hydrogels varying in cross-link density, ionic content, viscosity, the determination of the hydrogel swelling characteristics of these confined polymer networks, and the significant volume changes that occur when the cross-linked polymer phase separates the LCST, and C, the establishment of a connection between the degree of swelling in the networks and the absorption-desorption behavior of model macromolecules to the thermal response to surfaces as a function of temperature. This work lacks innovation and it needs clear differentiation with similar work of others. And boy, was I upset. I didn't understand how it could simultaneously be well thought out and written, but lack innovation. And none of the reviews actually gave me very clear guidance as what I had to do. So, but this basically summarizes it, that it lacks innovation and it needs clear differentiation with similar work, earlier work of others. So shortly after receiving the rejection, I was able to serve on an Nsf camp. And serving on that Nsf panel helped me, I didn't see it at the time, helped me put my review into perspective, especially how the proposal got reviewed. And I sat on this, so I was on this panel. This was in a different program than I had submitted my proposal to, but it was, I learned an awful lot. And as part of this panel, I think I reviewed maybe 10 or 12 proposals. We had about 30 proposals, more than that. We had like 35 or 40 proposals, actually quite a bit number of proposals. So I think I reviewed 10 or 12 proposals. And I, as a reviewer, have to assess each proposal based on intellectual merit and broader impacts. And then, so you submit your individual reviews, and then you meet, the panel will meet. It used to be in person, but it's usually done virtually now. And you as an individual reviewer have to sort of bring up 2 or 3, you're gonna be the lead on 2 or 3 proposals of which you have reviewed. And you have to make a case for why you think the proposal's deserving of being funded or not. And that's based on your individual evaluation of this. After you sort of make your case, the 2 other reviewers can also give their information. And then if the panel wants to discuss it, the panel will discuss it. The panel may not discuss it and just take at face value what the individual reviewers say, and those individual scores will sort of stand. And a decision is ultimately going to be made by the panel as to whether or not that particular proposal is in the non-funding category, if it's highly recommended, or if it's recommended if secondary funds are available. And what did I learn in this? What did I learn in this process? Well, there's a clear difference between proposals that are lacking and those that are not lacking. I'm just going to call those bad and good for lack of a better adjective. So that's very clear. What's harder to ascertain is the distinction between proposals that are good, that are funded, and those are good, but not funded. And that distinction can be very subtle. So, and why do I mean that, right? What do I mean from that? Okay, so there were a few proposals that were highly evaluated or supported by the panel. But they suffered from a statement made by one of the reviewers, such as, this is Edisonian science, and Edisonian science is something that is not hypothesis driven. Or this work duplicates what others have already done, which is sort of where mine fell into. And the other thing that I sort of want to point out is that reviewers do not always justify their reviews. So one reviewer can say this duplicates the work of others. And sometimes the panel says, okay. Others on the panel may challenge those statements. But this is something that I learned. If the PI does not explicitly address, i.e. how the work is distinct from similar work, these statements will doom an otherwise great proposal. So we on the panel, what we've done this, I've served on many panels, is if someone says this work duplicates the others or the work of others, we go back to the proposal and we try to figure out if we can justify or not justify that particular criticism of the proposal. But if a proposer doesn't ever say how their work is distinct from other, it's hard for us on the panel to make a case for that proposal because you're not absolutely necessarily familiar with every detail of one's proposal. So you need to use what they have written in that proposal to advocate their work. But what became very clear is that it was through the panel discussion that I realized I alone cannot judge intellectual merit and broader impacts. I can make a guess as to what they are. I can write an opinion on that, but it doesn't matter. That opinion does not matter until it gets discussed by the panel. And then it's going to be that confirmation of the panelists that's going to then solidify whether or not a proposal has met the intellectual merit and broader impacts requirements for that program, or if it's worthy of being funded. So after I got back, I was actually, I was, that panel review was good, but it also made me realize, how lacking my proposal was. And so this is what I did. I ended up asking 5 colleagues to review my proposal. I asked about 5 of them to review my proposal. And that process was quite a long process. And it was hard to hear some of the feedback because my inclination was to argue that they're wrong and I'm right. Or that, oh, I talked about that on page 8. That's important too. You don't want to, if something's important, you don't want to wait until page 8. And what I found from this experience is that it was tough, but a necessary experience for me. And they gave me feedback. They completely destroyed my proposal. And so even though my proposal was recommended to be funding if there were secondary funds available, I ended up rewriting my entire proposal. And what did I do, right? Well, this is where I went. So now I knew way in advance I was going to be applying to DMR college. I reached out to the program manager again and discussed some very specific ideas. And program managers don't always give you, that they'll say no, but they won't necessarily say, hey, that's a good idea or not. But at least you know that it fits the scope and that this would be funded if it rose to that level during the review process. And so through this entire experience, it gave me the confidence to rewrite the proposal. It wasn't an easy experience though. I want to say this time with purpose and direction. I'll say purpose and direction sort of anxiously, because I knew that I could not repeat, the sort of proposal that I had submitted before. And so what did this review process help me with? And I want to go back. I'm going to show you this is my very first paragraph, opening up my proposal that I wrote. Oh, wait a second here. I put together my slides pretty quickly, and all right, I have made a mistake here. Oh, I'm sorry about this. I can fix this very quickly.
This is really very helpful, Dr. Toomey. I especially like the fact that you called out that you made an important point, but that it didn't make it until page 8.
Yeah.
That is such a common thing to happen for early career grant writers.
Yeah. I'm gonna stop the share for just a second, and I'm gonna come back because I really want to make this. I really want to push this one point forward, because I want you to see what my first proposal, the first paragraph of the proposal was versus the second time I wrote it. And this is what's so hard to communicate. All right, I'm going to share this right here. Let's see if I can't do this here. All right, I'm going to go back to Zoom and share this now. All right, so here was my title: Career. Connecting macromolecular adsorption phenomena to the volume phase transition of intelligent polymer network films. And there's a problem right there with my title. It means absolutely nothing. It's jargon. That's something that I learned when my peers wrote this. And I want to read to you the very first paragraph. To address the challenges of engineering soft surfaces with on and off capabilities, and to lay the foundation for smart surfaces with bind and release properties, the proposed career effort aims to establish an innovative long-term program for studying, measuring, and understanding structure, property, function relationships in stimuli-responsive thin films of cross-linked polymers. This research foundation will not only lead to novel technological applications in biomaterials, sensor technology, and microfluidics, but it will also inspire and prepare students with both the critical thinking skills and tools to confront leading issues in materials and interfacial engineering in the 21st century. I spent a lot of time putting that paragraph together. What I learned is that this is a wasted paragraph. I am using jargon. I'm using things like structure, property, function relationships. I say it's innovative. I say that it's going to have applications. But I don't actually say what it is that I'm doing or why it's necessary. And something else that I learned about is that I'm not taking ownership. I'm writing the first paragraph as if, well, there are challenges and they have to be addressed. I don't actually say what the challenges are and why they have to be addressed. So I'm going to go back to the presentation now. Okay. So this is what happened with my first paragraph, before and after getting feedback. This is after feedback, and I want you to see how it changed. Notice my title changed. Responsive surfaces with built-in logic. And it may not have much meaning to a lot of you. However, what I've done is I first of all, I shortened it, but it also becomes somewhat of an intrigue. What does he mean by built-in logic? And I tried to address the taking ownership of my research. And so now my first paragraph became, my proposed career effort will establish, not may establish, but will establish a long-term program to design, construct, and study intelligent cross-linked polymer films. The research outcomes will provide the groundwork to rationally design active surfaces with controlled response logic and will enable students with both the critical thinking skills and tools to become leaders in materials and interfacial engineering. Specific areas that motivate my interest in smart surfaces include catch and release applications for controlling and directing absorption phenomena and polymer networks that amplify their nanoscale environment into a macroscopic volume phase change, either for sensing or for feedback purposes. And so what made this first paragraph so much better than the other paragraph is that, you know, I came out and I said, I'm going to establish this. I didn't say yet why I'm going to establish it. That's going to come in the second paragraph. But I want to show you the old proposal versus the new proposal. So in the rejected proposal, you know, I want to sort of, this is how I motivated this proposal. It was to establish the design criteria by which to create successful applications of smart polymer layers. And we in order to do that, we need to establish fundamental relations in two key areas. How is the volume phase transition in confined networks related to the compositional structural makeup of the film, question mark? How are binding affinity and absorption phenomena related to the volume phase transition behavior, question mark? One of the most critical yet least understood aspects about thin polymer networks is the effect of confinement on the volume phase behavior, okay? So what I've done here is I've made statements or I've posed questions, but I never connected these questions to the field at large or to the to published literature. So I said that all of this stuff is important, but I never said why it's important. And I never said why the research has to be done. And it was that sort of realization in this, you know, this mock panel review that I had that I was like, oh, you're right. You know, if I'm a reviewer, right, why I don't know if this is important or not. And this is what really doomed the proposal. So I want to compare that now to what I ended up doing. And I'm not going to read the whole thing here. I mean, you can look at it. So right away, this is on page 1. This is actually the second paragraph, and this is the third paragraph, right? I get right into it. I say several publications have appeared over the last 15 years advancing the design and the use of responsive surface attached polymers. Despite this progress, however, there is limited understanding as to how surface attachment of a polymer chain influences. So I say what the problem is. But then I go on and I actually cite some of the discrepancies in the literature, where I say that confinement alters the ability of the constituent chains to swell compared to their bulk unconstrained counterparts. As a consequence, the dramatic changes observed in bulk phase transitions do not necessarily translate to those observed in surface attached configurations. Indeed, untethered, and this is a lot of stuff that's very particular to our field, but I said some polymers behave in a certain way, and I referenced it. And I said that other polymers behave in a different way, and I referenced that. And then I laid out what the hypothesis is. Our hypothesis is that the nature of the volume phase transition depends on the chemical constituency of the polymer and its structural topology. However, there have been no known studies that solidify this concept. And I sort of tied this in that if we want to get predictable behavior, we have to understand this connection. So to address this need, we propose to construct carefully designed polymer networks as model systems to probe relationships between intermolecular interactions, surface confinement, and volume phase behavior. That was my structure, property, function relationship, but now I actually put that into language that's more concrete. And then I go in and I say, this approach will allow us to delineate the fundamental relations And then I kind of go in and say that the strength of the approach is threefold, right? So I've got 1, 2, 3 things. Another advantage of the approach is that, another issue at the time was that others can measure this, but it took a long time for this to be measured because of their bulk size. So we're reducing the size of everything to sort of speed up. And then I basically said, hey, that a key issue that we aim to answer is whether the concentration-dependent Fourier-Huggins interaction parameter that has been measured in LCST polymer solutions is universal, or whether it depends on system confinement. And we didn't know that at that point. So even if a lot of this stuff doesn't necessarily make sense, what I just said, what I think I was able to do that I did not do in my previous proposal is that I was able to succinctly state the problem and how it ties to the field. I have a hypothesis that addresses the problem, and I explain what makes our approach unique. And I have served on many, many panels. And if you cannot make this connection on the first page of your proposal, it's hard to read the rest of the proposal because you don't know why you're reading it. So it's very important to make that connection on the first page. And it's sometimes hard to know how to do this. And that's where the feedback from others, and you can do this if you're a junior faculty member. I mean, I help out junior. If a junior faculty member comes and talks to me, I will always read their proposal and give them this same feedback that I got. So in summary, and again, this was sort of my journey. Everyone's journey is going to be unique, but if I can give you, a few things, right? Early on, you want to identify an NSF program for your career and talk to the program manager. Sometimes program managers change, but that's really important to do right, because you're really targeting your proposal to a particular program. And then just tell that program manager that you want to serve on a panel. It is serving on that panel that is going to help you understand how things get funded in that particular program. Different programs have different nuances. It's always good to serve on a panel no matter what, but it's even better to serve on a panel in the program that you want to get funded in. I had some funding from CMMI, for instance, and what they look for in their panels are ever so slightly different than what they look for, let's say, in DMR polymers. And one of the questions that the program manager kept coming back with, there was two things. One, could this proposal fit better in another division? And two, what is the hypothesis that's being tested? What is the hypothesis? And that question came up so many times that I was like, you know what? In order to be successful in writing a proposal, you better be able to answer that question in a way that reviewers can easily find it, not search for it. So, I mean, it's got to be clear and it's got to be upfront. It could be that a reviewer doesn't think your hypothesis is relevant. Well, that's okay. But if you don't have it in there, that's what kills your proposal. And these are the sort of things that you find out when you serve on panels. And so that's why I'm going to say follow directions. If you have served on a panel and you've learned stuff, follow those directions. Because, or if a program manager tells you, if you don't know the budget, right, run it by the program manager first. If you're uncertain if something fits, go back to the description of the program and make certain that your proposal fits into one of those descriptions of what they fund. If the program funds fundamental research, it better be fundamental. And how different divisions or programs deal with that sort of fundamentality versus a little bit more applied, it really depends on the program. And then finally, use your colleagues for review and feedback. This does not guarantee success, but what I have found out is it does help with immediate shortcomings in the proposal that often doom success. And it's always frustrating when you get a review that says, hey, this is a great field, or this is a great proposal, but it's a crowded field, and your proposal doesn't really stand out. And these are the sort of things that can be caught early by, early in the writing process, I should say, through, I'm sorry, not the, you want to be able to have a draft first that you can give to a colleague, and they'll come back and they'll say, I don't really understand why you're doing this. And sometimes your reaction is to say, well, this is why I'm doing it, blah, blah, blah. And, but if it's not in the proposal, it's not in the proposal. And you cannot expect reviewers to read between the lines. So you just have to come out and say what you're doing. And you'll see that in all the proposals that get funded, that's exactly what the proposals do. So that's just a little bit of my journey. And hopefully this is helpful, kind of sharing this. And does it get easier with time? And the answer is no. This is something that you kind of have to keep going back to every time you write a proposal. You have to make certain that it meets this intellectual merit and these broader impacts that it gets reviewed on. And sometimes it's hard to know that in advance. And that's where, serving on panels becomes critically important. So you want to continue serving on panels to make certain that you are staying abreast with what is getting funded, as well as how proposals are being written. And that's sort of the final thing that I wanted to say. So I thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, please ask.
Thank you so much, Dr. Toomey. That was terrific. So much really in this presentation to unpack. And I'm really grateful that you're willing to use as a case study for your presentation, your own career award.
Right. And I'm going to update that slide, and I'll send you my new slide deck with the updated slide. I must have accidentally erased it.
Now, is the your 2005 career award, is that something that you'd like to share?
Oh, yeah, I can. But this is where I want to be very careful, right? This is where I said you can have blueprints for successful awards, but take them with a grain of salt. And that's what I learned, because what I basically did is I took this other person's career award, and I liked how they had all of their their titles and their subpoints and stuff like that. So I basically pulled out all the text and kept all of their their headers, right? And I just substituted all of my stuff in there, and I was like, hey, I've got an award-winning proposal now. So I have no problem sharing my proposal, but I do want to say that don't rely on it, though. That nothing can take the place of getting feedback from your colleagues. In like a mock sort of, if you can put together a mock panel for yourself, oh, that is the best feedback. And is it important to have people that have reviewed before on NSF? I think so, but it's not necessary. Don't forget that a lot of people that review for NSF have never reviewed for NSF before.
And so, organizations like the University of South Florida host a number of internal funding opportunities, and these are opportunities for early career faculty and even graduate students to think about what other areas that you can serve as a peer review panelist, maybe at a professional organization. I mean, aren't you a peer reviewer for American Chemical Society, Dr. Toomey?
Yeah, ACS, yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you submit to places, they will usually use you as a reviewer in the future. Okay, so I've got two questions here. I'm gonna answer them in reverse. I applied to early career scientist panel, but was denied because you already had to have one submitted, one grant. So that's to get on the panel. And yeah, usually you will not serve on a career scientist panel. So your best opportunity is to serve on an unsolicited panel. And most programs run, I think, 3 panels a year. And so there you can get on one of those panels without having submitted a grant before. And so any suggestion on how to put oneself in line to serve on a panel, yeah, I'll get to that in just a second. So usually they do not put junior faculty on on a career scientist panel, and they do not put faculty on there that have not gotten careers award. That's not completely true. They'll put senior researchers on there, and recent people that have gotten a career award will sit on those future panels. And that's actually something that I use to my advantage. That's why when I reached out to folks who'd gotten career awards in DMR polymers, I was able to get access to their proposals that they had submitted to DMR polymers, and I knew that they were also serving on the panels. But to answer your question a little more generally, you don't have to be on a career panel. Because again, career panels and unsolicited panels get evaluated on your intellectual merit and your broader impacts. And what you learn in an unsolicited panel is going to absolutely apply to how you write a proposal for a career award. There are slight differences that I had alluded to, and that in a career award, it's really about combining, education and research into one proposal. But really, the proposals are evaluated exactly the same way with regards to intellectual merit. And what I'm also going to say is that intellectual merit is what gets your proposal funded. If your intellectual merit is weak, but your broader impacts are strong, that does not get a proposal funded. If your intellectual merit is strong and maybe you have a weakness in your broader impacts, they can still get funded. So in terms of learning really what is that intellectual merit, it's just as useful to serve on an unsolicited panel, and that's what most of us have done. I've never actually sat on a career panel myself. So hopefully that answers your question, Tina. And then any suggestions on how to put oneself in line to serve on a panel? Yeah, contact the program manager and let that program manager know that you want to serve on a panel. Most program managers, in my experience, will work with you. Some may not. And if that's the case, reach out to somebody, a senior or someone that serves on those panels, and see if they cannot recommend you to serve on a panel. And so I don't want to say common, but one thing is that you reach out to your PhD advisor and you say, hey, can you recommend me to serving on a panel? So that's the way that it's done. And then the third way, okay? The third way is go to NSF directly. Fly up to NSF, meet with your program manager, meet with program managers, meet with more than one, meet with 5 or 6. And this is, I should have said this, I forgot to mention this. This is something that I did in the beginning. And you tell all of them, hey, you want to serve on a panel. And you'll serve on a panel. It may not necessarily be in the program that you apply your career to, but serving on a panel is much better than never serving on a panel. Serving on a panel in the area that you want to get funding in is absolutely the best. But if it's not possible, you still want to serve on panels because you do learn about the process. Okay, so and I have another question here. Given the fact that throughout your path to receive an NSF Career Award, you had to keep in touch with the program director, how much do you think the reviewing and funding is objective? Do you believe that shifting the directions of your proposal will help facilitate funding a proposal? There's been a lot of debate about this, whether or not reviewing and funding is completely objective. There's always going to be bias in it. There's always going to be bias in it. I can tell you, though, with pretty good confidence that of all of the panels that I have sat on, that the ones that have been funded deserve to get funded. And there are also, unfortunately, a lot of proposals that do not get funded. And so part of that process is trying to figure out how you write your proposal to get it funded. And there are some people that receive NSF grants that are very successful in a particular program over many, many years. And that's because they have sort of figured out how to write a proposal to get it funded in that program. That's a very fortunate situation to be in. Many people are not like that. One of the reasons is that panels keep changing. So unlike NIH, or those that review your panel, they're not going to be the same from year in and year out. So you just want to make certain, again, that you don't sort of fall through, those, that you do not address, everything that's required in the intellectual merit. And if you can do that, right, it may not get funded the first time. But then you sort of have to think about your reviews and how to address those reviews. And you can talk to the program manager. That may or may not be helpful. I've talked to program managers after I've gotten reviews I don't like. Usually, and it's a process. If you have put to, it's about a 6 month. It's a 6 month process, I think, because you really have to sort of think about, all of these nuances. But again, I want to assure you of the fact, though, that reviewing and funding, I think, is as objective as it can possibly be. And I think that the NSF is one of the fairest places for getting things funded.